Got a special guest today, Greg Orman, the author of Declaration of Independence. Take a look at this book here. He ran for election in 2014, wrote this book about the two-party system and how to break the stranglehold on our form of government. Greg, when you were out there campaigning, you noticed something. What was it?
Well, you know, I noticed that there's a lot more common ground among voters than the politicians would like us to believe. In fact, at our events, because I was an independent and running for the United States Senate, we found that voters from across the political spectrum came. And when I got them in a room together and talking to each other, it was clear that they had a whole lot that they agreed on.
When in writing this book and doing the research and looking at all the numbers, you ran across some interesting graphics and interesting information about the way people view the other party. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, and it's one of the reasons I say that independents are an essential ingredient to the problem-solving process. Right now, partisanship has become the new prejudice. In 1960, they asked people a question. They said, would you be displeased if your child married someone from the opposite political party?
Yeah.
4% of Democrats and 5% of Republicans said yes.
Virtually nothing.
50 years later, in 2010, they asked that same question, and a third of Democrats and 49% of Republicans said yes.
You can see the graphic right there. It's astonishing. I did not expect those numbers to be so high. The advantage for the political system and keeping this system is significant, obviously. That re-election is a big deal. Trying to get the primaries, both sides to vote for you and get the nomination is difficult. Once that's established, though, these independents come more into play as far as the general election, correct?
Yeah, and in many primaries and caucus states, independents aren't allowed to vote.
Right.
So we independents really only get to state our preferences in many places when we get to the general election. And in this year, in November, when we see the general election matchup for president, I think the interests and the votes of independents are going to be really on top of mind for people.
How do we break this cycle? How do we get to more than a two-party system?
Well,
is it possible?
Yeah, it absolutely is. 43% of Americans now self-identify as politically independent. And what I talk about in the book is the power of declaring your independence. By declaring your independence as a voter, you're basically telling politicians in Washington that you can no longer take my vote for granted. You actually have to earn it. You've got to work for it. And you send them a really powerful message. You send them the message that you can't go there and just hide behind your party label. You actually have to get something done for the American people. And I think that's a really powerful message. 43% of Americans have already done it. And I'm encouraging everybody who hasn't to read the book and understand the arguments behind it.
The book is called A Declaration of Independence, spelled a little bit differently here. Greg Orman, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Jane?